Welcome to Guide Mia. Today we're going to talk about the full case round trip on Cympha, one real ortho case traveling from intraoral scans all the way to a patient opening their finished treatment plan on a phone. This lecture is for anyone who wants to see the whole pipeline at once, a clinician onboarding their first lab, a lab manager auditing their handoffs, or a designer who's only ever seen the middle of the workflow. By the end you'll know how a case goes from scans in Cympha Studio to a finalized plan in a patient's browser, and which app, which role, and which page is responsible for every single handoff. 9 steps, 4 parties, no gaps. We'll go in order: what has to be in place before you start, then the clinician assembling the virtual patient, creating the case, the lab manager triaging it, the agent delivering it to a workstation, the designer designing it, the request for approval, the clinician's decision, the share to the patient, and the patient opening the plan. Then what success looks like for all 4 parties, and the 6 things that most commonly go wrong. The real case takes hours to days depending on lab turnaround, but the mechanics fit in one sitting. Everything here comes straight from the written guide on cympha.com, so follow along on screen, or listen now and read later. Let's trace the case. Here's the cast. The clinician assembles the patient's records, submits the case, and later approves the design. The lab manager receives the case, checks it, and assigns it to someone. The designer does the actual design work and sends it back for approval. And at the very end, the patient, who never sees any of the machinery, opens their finished plan in a browser. 4 parties, and between them a chain of handoffs. The thing to hold on to for the rest of this lecture is that every one of those handoffs is explicit. A status flips. A holder changes. An email goes out. Nothing moves by side channel, nothing depends on somebody remembering to forward an attachment. That matters for a practical reason. It means you can always answer the question, where is this case, and whose desk is it on? By opening one page. Once you can name which app, which role, and which page owns each handoff, the whole platform stops feeling like magic and starts feeling like a relay race with very clear baton passes. So watch for the baton as we go. What has to exist before this round trip can run? 4 things. First, a clinician with a Cympha account and a lab they've already connected with. Remember, there is no public lab directory. The lab is found through the lab search on the new case form, so that connection has to be made in the real world first. Second, a lab with a lab manager and at least one designer approved on the team page, approved, not pending, and that distinction will come back to bite us in the troubleshooting section later. That designer should already have their workstation wired, Ortho Plus installed and activated, the agent installed and paired. If it isn't, there's a separate end-to-end guide and lecture called Wire a Designer's Workstation End-to-End, and you should run that first. Third, a scan set. And here's a nice touch: Cympha Studio ships a demo patient, and the workflow is identical whether you use real intraoral scans or that demo. So you can rehearse this entire round trip end-to-end without a real patient. I genuinely recommend it. Fourth and last, have the patient's email address ready, because you'll need it in step 8. And if this is your first Cympha case ever, the What You Need guide covers the prerequisite checklist from scratch. Step 1 belongs to the clinician, in Cympha Studio at studio.cympha.com. They import the intraoral scans, STL or PLY, any CBCT volume, photos, and a byte registration if they have one. Studio composes all of that into one virtual patient. Concretely, that means 3 things: the upper and lower arches aligned to each other, the CBCT registered to the scans, and the photo gallery sitting in the side panel where you can reach it. So instead of 4 unrelated files you have one assembled patient. Then the clinician works the case the way a clinician thinks. Orbit to the area of concern. Drop a distance measurement on the arch. Capture a labeled view into the gallery, so the lab sees the same thing you're looking at. Annotate any soft tissue concern, or any note the lab should read before they start. And now one important boundary, because people ask this: none of that has left the browser yet. Studio is a single user planning surface right up until you save. Nothing is shared, nothing is submitted, nobody at the lab can see any of it. That changes with the very next click. Step 2 is the first handoff. The clinician clicks Create Cympha Case in Studio. Studio packages the entire session, the meshes, the zip DICOM, the photos, the measurements, into a single case bundle, and uploads it through the same Cympha account they're already signed into. No export, no file manager, no second login. When the upload finishes, the browser navigates by itself to the new case form on app.cympha.com, with that bundle already attached. From there it's the standard intake, and there are 3 things to fill in. Search for the lab by name. Pick the category, and there are 4: AlignerBot, orthodontics, implant, or lab service. Then fill in the patient demographics. Click Submit. Behind the scenes the case is promoted from a draft to submitted, and the holder is the lab manager. The case is now formally on their desk. And both the clinician and the lab manager receive an email from Cympha confirming the submission, so neither side is left guessing whether it landed. That's the pattern you'll see at every handoff from here on: a status, a holder, and a notification. It's worth pausing on this moment, because it's the difference between Cympha and a folder full of email attachments. Everything the clinician assembled, the scans, the volume data, the photos, the measurements, the annotations, travels together as one case. The lab manager will open one page and see the full clinical context, not a loose pile of files with a note saying "See attached." And from the instant it's submitted, the case has 3 properties that never go away: a status, a holder, and an activity log. Every handoff you're about to see for the rest of this lecture is just a status flip on this one object, recorded in that log. Which means every handoff can be audited afterwards. You can always reconstruct who had it and when. Keep an eye on the status as we go, because that sequence is the spine of the whole story. Submitted, then designing, then awaiting approval, then approved, then delivered. 5 words, 9 steps, 4 people. If you remember nothing else from today, remember that spine. Step 3, and the lab manager takes over. They open the queue page on app.cympha.com. The new case is sitting at the top with status submitted, and the row shows the patient name, the category, and the clinician's name in the customer column, so at a glance they know what it is and who sent it. Clicking the row opens the case detail page. Now the manager does the triage properly. They scan the files, they look at the lab slip, which is downloadable as a PDF using the Download Lab Slip button, handy if the bench works from paper, and they read the parameters the clinician filled in on the form. The question they're answering is simple: is this case complete enough to design? If it is, they assign a designer. A dialog opens listing the lab's designers, they pick the right one for this case, and confirm. 3 things happen on that confirmation: the status flips to designing, the holder becomes that designer, and the case leaves the lab manager's primary queue view, because it's no longer their problem. One variation worth knowing: if your lab has a case intaker on staff, the case passes through intake review first, and the intaker validates the files and parameters before assignment happens. Without an intaker, the case goes from submitted straight to designing. The mechanics from the lab manager's side have their own guide: assign a case to a designer. Step 4 happens without anybody clicking anything at all, which is why people miss it. On its next poll, and the agent checks for new cases every 20 seconds, the designer Cympha agent manager downloads the case files onto their machine. That's the case bundle plus any standalone scan files, and they go into the workspace folder the designer chose when they configured cloud monitoring. They land in a tidy, predictable structure, organized by category, with each case in its own folder named for the patient, the date, and the case number. And every case folder gets a lab slip PDF, which refreshes automatically whenever the case changes, so the slip in the folder is never stale. From the designer's side, 3 things arrive in roughly this order. First, an email from Cympha telling them about the assignment. Second, the case appears in my assignments on app.cympha.com, with status designing. Third, the case folder fills with files in their workspace. The designer does absolutely nothing to make the download happen, the agent handles it. The one failure mode: if the agent isn't paired, the download stalls, and everything else looks fine. The Install and Pair Cympha Agent Manager Guide covers pair recovery. Step 5 is the actual design work, and it uses both surfaces for what each is best at. Start with context. The designer opens the case bundle in Cympha Studio, in the browser, and note that Cympha Studio is a browser app, so there is nothing to launch from File Explorer. The case page links out to the Studio workspaces. Opening it brings back the clinician's assembled virtual patient exactly as it was built: meshes, volume data, photos, measurements. The designer never has to reconstruct the clinical intent from loose files. Now the design itself. For that they open the downloaded scans from the workspace folder in Ortho Plus. Ortho Plus runs the planner, and the designer adjusts staging, attachments, IPR, whatever this particular case needs, and saves the output into the case's workspace folder. Here's the clever part: the agent is watching that folder. A review file, and any zip design output, uploads automatically the moment it appears. Most other file types behave differently on purpose. They appear in the agent's Cloud Monitor panel and wait for a click on upload, so the designer can vet what leaves the machine before it goes anywhere. And the Ortho Plus working project file is a special case: it stays local, always. It is not something the agent uploads. Once an upload completes, the files panel on the case page populates within seconds. If you want this loop from the designer's own point of view, that's the guide called A Designer's First Day on Cympha. Step 6, the design goes back across the net. When the deliverable is uploaded and the designer is satisfied with it, they open the case detail page and click Request Approval in the Actions bar. On Aligner style cases there's a shortcut worth knowing about: a review file arriving via the agent requests approval all by itself. No click needed at all. Either way, the status flips from designing to awaiting approval. And then a system label appears, which names exactly which gate this is, because a case can pass this way more than once. Plan approval pending is the first round of an ortho or aligner case, that's the treatment plan. Appliance approval pending is the second round, that's the appliance design. And design approval pending is what you see on single-step lab services, where there's only one gate. Read that label, it tells you where in the case you are. Finally, the holder transfers to the clinician, and the clinician receives an email from Cympha with a link straight to the approval page for this case. The designer's part is done, for now. Step 7 is the clinician's decision, and it happens on a deliberately narrow page. The header reads the patient's name plus the awaiting approval badge, with the step label underneath: approval needed, treatment plan. Below that, the lab slip download and the file list. And at the bottom right, 3 actions. Door 1, approve, accept the deliverable. The status flips to approved. For 2 cycle categories like orthodontics or AlignerBot, the case then goes back to designing for the next cycle, treatment plan first, appliance design second, with the same designer still holding it. On the final cycle, a digital case advances straight to delivered. Door 2, request changes. This bounces the case back to the designer who built it, and the status flips to changes requested. The clinician describes what they want changed in the case chat. But there's one important exception here, and it catches people. On AlignerBot and Clear Aligner AI cases specifically, this button requires a structured file to be uploaded first, either an XML tooth position file, exported from Cympha Studio's 3D review, or a transfer pack from Guide Mia Ortho Plus. The reason is that free text instructions can't drive the planner, the AI needs actual tooth positions, not prose. The dialog itself points at those 2 valid artifact types, so you're not left guessing. Door 3, escalate to lab manager. This routes the case to the lab manager for a more senior review, and the status flips to escalated. Our clinician picks approve, the case moves to approved, and then on to the next step or to delivery depending on the category. There's a full walkthrough of this page in approve or reject a design. Step 8, the final deliverable is approved, the case has its production plan file, and it's time to bring in the patient. On the case detail page, the clinician finds share to patient in the header. Now, pay attention to this, because it's the most common misclick in the whole round trip. Share to patient sits right next to the regular share button, and the regular share button is for colleague shares, not patient shares. They are 2 different things and they go to 2 different places. Pick the right one. In the share dialog, the clinician enters the patient's email address and picks which plan export to share, the final confirmed one. Sharing is per single file, and that's a deliberate privacy boundary. The patient will see only that one plan. Never the case, never its other files, never its messages. Nothing else on Cympha. If a newer version of the plan comes along later, a revision, a second phase, resharing it to the same patient updates their existing share rather than creating a duplicate, so the patient's view doesn't fill up with near identical entries. Send the invitation, and Cympha emails the patient. New patients set up a patient account from the link, returning patients just sign in. The full detail is in share a treatment plan with a patient. And step 9, the finish line. The patient taps the link in the email. They land on the patient sign-up page on app.cympha.com, with the invitation ticket already filled in for them. They don't have to type a code or find anything. They set a password, accept, and they're routed into their patient workspace. That workspace is deliberately narrow, it lists exactly one thing, the case the doctor just shared. The patient cannot see other patients, cannot see the doctor's other cases, cannot see the case folder, and has no editing tools at all. Even the Cympha Studio Chrome is hidden in the patient workspace, only the viewer is shown. Then they click open, and Cympha Studio loads the shared plan, the very same view the doctor approved, read only. And they can genuinely explore it. Orbit the model. Step through the aligner stages one by one and watch the teeth move. Zoom in on the attachments. No app store, no download, no account maze, no waiting for a receptionist to call back. That is the whole point of the round trip, professional machinery on one end, a single clean link on the other. The patient side walkthrough is open your treatment plan as a patient. Here's the end state across all 4 parties, and it's worth checking each one, because each sees something different. The clinician sees the case with status delivered, digital categories advance there automatically on the final approval, so nobody has to remember to move it. They also see an entry under My Patients. If they enrolled a patient in ortho monitoring, there's a separate guide, How to Enroll a Patient in Ortho Monitoring, for that. And the chat thread with the lab is still open if they need follow-up. The lab manager sees that the case has cleared their queue, it sits under delivered until they click mark as finished to archive it, so archiving is a human decision, not an automatic sweep. The designer still holds the delivered case, and that is deliberate. Delivered keeps its holder, so the person who actually built the design is the person who fields follow-up questions about it. Their workspace folder also still has the case folder for reference. And the patient sees their plan in their patient workspace, opens it in Studio, and gets ortho monitoring reminders if you enrolled them. Notice the design philosophy running through all 4. Delivered is deliberately not a dead end. The relationships stay live until the lab explicitly closes the case. 6 things go wrong more often than anything else, and they split neatly into 2 halves. Here's the front half, the problems that happen before the design is ever approved. Problem 1, the Create Cympha case action is missing in Studio. The cause is nearly always the same. Cympha Studio opens and renders without a sign-in. You can load scans and look at them signed out, but writing back to Cympha, and that includes creating a case, requires being signed in. So sign in and try again, the action comes back. Problem 2, the case appeared with status submitted, but with no files on it. That means the case bundle upload from Studio probably stalled part way. Go to the case detail page and look at the activity log. If there are 0 file events on it, that confirms it, nothing arrived. Ask the clinician to re-upload from Studio. Problem 3, the designer's My Assignments view doesn't show the case that was just assigned to them. The usual cause is that the designer is still sitting as pending designer rather than an approved designer. Have the lab manager open My Team and approve them, and the Wire a Designer's Workstation end-to-end guide walks through that approval in context. And the back half, the problems that show up after the design comes back. Problem 4, the clinician clicked request changes on an AlignerBot case, and the confirm button is grayed out. This is that structured artifact rule from step 7, and it is not a bug. AlignerBot cases require a structured revision artifact before the reject can confirm, either an XML tooth position file, exported from Cympha Studio's 3D review, or a transfer pack from Guide Mia Ortho Plus. The dialog itself surfaces both paths. Upload one of those two file types, and the confirm button comes alive. Problem 5, and this one deserves a proper explanation because the first pass through this workflow always raises it. Share to patient is missing entirely from the case detail page. That's a category rule. Share to patient only appears on orthodontics, AlignerBot, and clear aligner AI cases. Those are the categories that produce a plan file a patient can usefully view and step through. On implant and lab service cases, the button simply isn't there, because there is nothing a patient could meaningfully look at. So if you can't find the button, check the category before you check anything else. Problem 6, the patient signs into their workspace and sees nothing at all. Confirm that the share targeted the exact email address they signed up with, not an alias, not a variant. If the doctor typed jane@gmail.com and the patient signed up with jane@hotmail.com, the invitation is sitting against the address you sent it to, not the one they actually use day to day. The fix is simply to resend via share to patient to their real address. That's the full round trip, 9 steps, 4 parties, 1 case object carrying everything from the first scan to the patient's screen. My suggestion is this: run it once yourself with Cympha Studio's demo patient before you trust it with a live case. The workflow is identical, and 20 minutes of rehearsal buys a lot of confidence. Each step you saw today also has its own focused how-to in the docs, and the round-trip guide links to every one of them. Submit an AlignerBot case, assign a case to a designer's first day on Cympha, approve or reject a design, share a treatment plan with a patient, and open your treatment plan as a patient. There's also a case status glossary if the status names ever blur together, and a file formats reference if you want to know exactly which file does what. Use the round-trip guide as your map, and those as the detail pages. The written version of this walkthrough, every page name, every status, every troubleshooting entry, lives at cympha.com. Open docs and find the full case round trip. If you want the rest of the series, subscribe. We're covering every Cympha workflow, one lecture at a time. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.